Alrighty, so in this video what we're going to be discussing is dialogues. Now this may be one of the only times in this series, at least so far, where I'm going to need to break things up into two files, and I'm going to show them side by side. I'm going to hide the good old web browser over here, but I think that's because I'm going to show you a stripped down version of how they do it from the example online on Material UI's website, but then I'm going to show you one of the typical strategies you would take, and that is you don't want to jam everything into one file. So I'm going to kind of do everything all in one file, all in app.js, and then after that I'm going to create a components folder and kind of show you what that process is like. For some of you, you could just skip that part. Other people who are maybe kind of new to React and are just trying to get a feel of how other people are doing it, or some small strategies, we're going to go that route. So without further ado, I have everything imported up here I'm going to need. And one thing I kind of want to do first is we have our app right here, and I want to make the trigger before I actually make the dialog. I think it's just easier to kind of think that way, and in this example, we're going to be feeding some props straight into the dialog. So if we were to start with the dialog first, the issue would be, where's this junk coming from? Where are we getting these values from? How the heck do I know anything? And what I find is just easier to start at where the dialog is going to fire and then work your way out that way. So let's come in here. Let's do some H3 right here, and let's just have use selected. And we're going to put, we have not written this yet, obviously we just started this tutorial, but we have this right here. So we're going to have a thing called selected value. So let's go ahead and make this so it stops yelling at us. We're going to use the very popular use state. Maybe one day there'll be an autocomplete for the React use state, but until then we have to just type it all the way out. And so right now it's set as it's like undefined right now, so there's no value at all being used. And so we're going to have this here. All right, that's awesome. We'll hit save. Nothing should blow up. Use selected, and then whatever we put in here, say we want to just test this right now. Bob, we selected Bob, but we don't want that because we want to select something from the dialogs. We want to show the feedback from whatever the end user does on the screen. Likewise, we want to show it to the user, but also we want to capture it, maybe to make an API call somewhere or make some other choices in our website. So let's come into here now. I'm going to make a sibling element here. Pop this open. Open the darn dialog. Once again, we're safe here. Let's give it a little bit of love here. Give it a variant of outlined, and let's make the color primary. And I drop them down this way because as you add more and more and more attributes or styles or whatever it may be, it's easier. Think of it like a resume you hand in. You want someone just to skim the whole way down and see what's going on. If you ever have to like start scrolling and then something, you have to wrap back around over here, and in some cases you can't get around that, but where you could help it out is just organize your stuff like that. And for some people, and for me especially, it was kind of weird to indent down like this. It just didn't have the typical HTML feel I was used to, but I promise you after a while this saves your organization, debugging time, all that other stuff. So the next thing we're going to need is an onClick. And this onClick is going to be attached to here, and it doesn't have to be a button. It could be other things you have, but we're just going to have a button because that's pretty traditional. We're going to do handle click open. And what this is going to do, and this is going to end up popping open our dialog here. So we're gonna make an arrow function here. Set open to true. That is, man, this autocomplete is kind of junky sometimes. I don't want a stereo panner node. I don't even know what that is. So, okay, we have open up here. So let's combine, or not combine, but group logically together. React, use state, and we're going to set it to false. And another strategy is that if you're doing a lot of use states, it's common or makes sense to group things together, and spaces when you're coding, some people just may roll their eyes and say, I already know this. But for people who don't, you typically want spaces in between new ideas. So it's kind of like you're writing a paragraph, you have your introduction, then you have like a space between, and then you have your first point or argument you're making in a paper. This is similar grouping style. So now that we could handle click open, it's going to come up here and it's going to set open to true. Now we don't have an open yet, but we're going to. So, or an open a dialog, I should say. So this is kind of what we have going on here, and I'm just going to go ahead in a quick and dirty way kind of get ahead of ourselves, because there's another function I have to deliver in here, and there's a couple other things I need to do, and I think it'll help a lot. So selected value, we're going to set to selected value. Let's bring this down here. We're going to have open is going to be equal to open, which makes sense because since this is a dialogue and it's not just hanging out on the page, we're going to need to signal something to it. So we have this here, and so we have Simpledialog, and I think it's complaining because I may have accidentally deleted that. Okay, there we go. So there's no Simpledialog, that's fine, that's expected to have an issue here. Let me give you even a space here. And then we have handle close, which has not been written yet. So handle close is going to do a couple of things for us, and this is pretty standard. This isn't something just kind of weird for the tutorial, for the documentation that you're going to have, and then you're never going to see it again. And I really hate when that happens, but let me walk through this here with you. So the strategy here now is whenever this dialog, which we have not created yet, is closed in some manner, we know that something's going to happen, and those more like some things. One is we're going to close it. So whether we click on something or whether we click outside of the dialog, we want to close it. And whether we capture a value or not, we want to set that value to whatever the user clicked on. So we have our base app.js figured out right now. So this may get a little, a little scrolly right here, but let's come up here and let's go ahead and make our Simpledialog. So we're going to come up here. Of course, it's going to be a function. We'll make a Simpledialog. It's going to take some props because we are providing those down below. And it's no different from what I have down here, selected value, open, and on close. So we're coming up here and we're catching them, and it's much easier than just doing these one line at a time. It's just much neater to unpack them this way. And so let's come up in here and do a return. And this is where the magic is going to start happening. So let's come in here and let's make a dialog. Okay, I thought it was actually going to create the element there for me. All right, no problem. We'll do that. And here is where all the stuff's going to go. And this is where it gets a little bulky. And that's why I suggest, and I'm going to show you, splitting this out into a separate file and then just importing it. Because you will eventually have components that are just long. They're a couple hundred, 400 lines long. And maybe you could refactor them, but maybe you have other important stuff you need to get to. And so you could always refactor, you could always do things better, but in the business world, sometimes you just have to keep moving, and you refactor when maybe there's downtime or there's a need for it. Once again, not trying to promote bad practices, but they happen, and not necessarily because, you know, you as a developer are just lazy. Sometimes just the train is just moving. So we're going to have a handle close here. And so what this is going to do is when you click away from the dialog, and once again, when this is all constructed, I'll walk back over this. Once you click away from the dialog, this fires. Without having this on close here, you must make an option. And so that is important to know. I would just put that right there. If you want them to click away, if they, you want to factor in a fat thumb or an accident, you must have this on close here. And so we're going to have open is equal to open, which makes sense. We're going to fire it off, down here on this open. We're going to send this on through down into here. So, okay, that makes sense. And so let's come into here and let's make our dialog title. Which account are you using? And this is, I think, a fair one that you'll typically see in real life. And yes, I know I've not done the handle close yet. I'll write that in just a minute. I want to flesh this out a little bit more. So we're going to come down into here. We're going to make a list. I think we may just have 2 items in here to make it really easy to follow along. And so then we're going to have a list item. We're going to make it a button so it's clickable. Without it, we're not going to be able to, we're just going to be able to view like a read only. We're not going to be able to do much else with it. Alrighty. And so we have this right over here. Actually, I gotta tighten that up. Sometimes I get a little space happy. So now we have a couple things that we need to write. That's fine, that's no big deal. We'll talk about those in just a minute, but let's flesh this out a tad bit more. Let's just have a list item avatar. Once again, this is not mandatory. This is just decorative stuff. An avatar. And then the person icon coming into here. Alrighty, we got this here. And then let's put some text on below here. Remember, primary is just what's gonna appear. And so, what should I put in here? I'll put in my dog's name. Bernie the dog. We'll close that off here. And I could add more in. I think I'm just going to keep it with 1 here because, as you could see, you have the dialog here. We have a list. You could add more things in here. It doesn't even have to be a list. You could have a picture pop up. You could have a picture with a couple buttons. You could put a card in here. Anything you want to appear on the screen, it'll do it. So now that we got this down here, it seems all set up. Let's come up here and kind of answer the question, what are these handle close and handle list item click? What's going on with those? So let's come up here and let's just start with the handle close. So we have this selected value, which is weird because you'd come to think, well, wouldn't you want to pass an argument in through here, right? Because on close, selected value, there's a selected value here, but how are we pulling this in? And I'll show you in just a second. Let me write this other one out here. Handle list item click. And in this one, we're actually passing in value. On close, value. And so it looks like we have this all set up here. Let's click save. Let's delete the stuff we didn't use. So I think this is a small enough example for now. Which account are you using? We could click off. Oh, and we see that we have a failure here. So let's see and let's track back what's going on. And we could see it's that. We click off and it works. We click on Bernie the dog and it works. So how is this working? So as we saw down here, we're passing in the selected value. And actually we have to update this. So we have a little bit of work left to do, but we're passing in the open value and the handle close. The handle close here takes a value in. All right, that's cool. And so that value is going to update the selected value, so this value right here, which we still have to fix and hunt down. It's also going to toggle the set open to false, or you could use the opposite of whatever open is. That's fine, but we know it's going to be false. So then this comes up here and handle close fires off. But as you notice, this is passing in an argument. Well, let's alert this out. Open that up, and we see that is blank. So this allows us to close it, but not send in a value to update the selected value down here, which is pretty cool, I gotta say. So how do we come up here and how do we change this so it doesn't say test when we're up here? We want it to say Bernie the dog. And that's pretty easy. And so what we could see right here is that we're passing in a string right here. And so what we possibly want to do, and there's better ways of organizing this, you don't necessarily want to use what they call magic strings, I believe is what they're called, or magic values, which means you just hard code them in there. Typically when you have a list, you're going to produce an array and you're just going to loop through a set of values you have elsewhere and just bomb them out right here. But for our purposes, we're just typing these in, hard coding them. But I definitely suggest not doing that because it's very hard to track down your problems. So let's save this here. And then we have Bernie the dog. That's super cool. That's awesome. Well, now that I've shown you how to use the dialog here, let's come in and let's just do a little bit of organization. So you have a components folder here. And then let's just have, what do we call it? Simpledialog.js. And I have an autocomplete feature here. So let's bring this on over. We're going to close this here. And let's just come on in. We know that we're going to need some props. And let's just cut everything on over that we need, because it's still going to work the same. Now it's going to complain that our imports aren't imported yet, but that'll be fine. Let's actually just change these to, I believe these are the same as a React fragment, so let's just pull this on out of here. So all this stuff here, I don't believe we need anymore. We're going to straight up delete this here. Yeah, and this is going to bomb out some stuff, but that's fine. Import Simpledialog from, we're going to go into components. All right, looks like there's no issues. So you would typically have something like this. You would have it be in its own folder, Simpledialog over here. Let's come in here and make sure it still works. Still works just fine. And so that's the way that you can make a dialog. I don't suggest making all-in-one file. And if you do, you screw up, you're in a crunch, you're just testing an idea out. Cool. But just know that you want to go back and separate this out, because this is its own component out here. But this is how you create dialogues. Good stuff. Feel free to subscribe, like, I recommend it, and leave some comments below.